So hello, we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. And I'm Abby Abrash-Walton-Knight. One of the hats I wear here is Assistant to the President for Sustainability and Social Justice. The other hat I wear here is as Director of our Center for Academic Innovation. And I got notice on Monday morning that Jen was going to be here on campus today, and thought that it would be a good opportunity for people who are still a part of this learning community directly to hear from a very recent alum, 2012 alum, about making that transition from this learning community and a focus on sustainability to being out in the world doing this work professionally. And so you all have probably seen Jen's bio that was circulated as part of this announcement, but Jen, you're serving as Wesleyan University's first sustainability coordinator, and a trail has been blazed before you. We have actually had a number of sustainability coordinators, including from the first cohort of the Green MBA program, Jenny Eisler, who became Clark University's first sustainability coordinator, graduated from the MBA first cohort. We've had people from the environmental studies master's programs go on to be sustainability coordinators at Franklin Pierce University and Skidmore, at Unity College, at a host of other places. So we have a good track record in training people up to go out in the world and, as I put as the title of this, live our mission, live the Antioch University New England mission of really advancing a just and sustainable society. And so I'm really pleased that Jen was willing to come today and have an informal conversation, as informal as you can be when you're being mic'd and taped, to talk with people. But we wanted to just start off by inviting Jen to share a little bit about what this transition to being a sustainability coordinator has been like, and then to just open it up to have a conversation with all of you. So thanks, Jen.
Sure.
The floor is yours.
All right. Well, so the reason that I came to Antioch in the first place, I graduated from undergrad in 2009. Around 2007, I realized that the position that I have now existed and thought, this sounds perfect for me. I get the opportunity to work with younger students. I get the opportunity to work with older adults. I don't have to say, oh, I only want to focus on energy efficiency or I only want to focus on social justice. I can really get the chance to do all of that. And so when I graduated from undergrad, I thought, okay, this is what I really want to do, but I don't really feel like I'm ready, because at that time, and still a lot now, most college sustainability offices are an office of one. Some of the luckier ones that have been more established or for larger schools might have a couple of people now. But my idea had been, oh, I'll just work as, I don't know, an assistant or something like that in a sustainability office to get a sense of what it's like. And then that'll transition into me being the sustainability coordinator somewhere. But then I found that jobs like that were very, very, very few and far between. And I was really intimidated by the idea of leading an entire school's sustainability program. And I had heard about Antioch actually from the alum that Abby was talking about, who was the coordinator at Skidmore, and she had said, it's fantastic, you're going to learn a lot of things that will apply really well to what I do on a daily basis, you should really check it out. And at that point, mentally, I was done with school. I knew grad school was probably in my future, but a little bit farther off. But then I thought about it and ended up applying here at sort of the last minute. Decided to do environmental education because I felt like that was my weakest point. I knew a lot of stuff, but I didn't really feel like I knew how to effectively communicate that to other people. And it was a little bit intimidating at first, and some of the things that I learned, I thought, how does this relate to what I want to do? But I was very driven and focused. A lot of people, I think, come here and know vaguely what they want to do. I was one of the exceptions where I knew the job that I wanted, I knew pretty much the area I wanted to work, and so the classes that I took and the internships that I did and the projects that I did were all sort of with the concept of I want to be a college sustainability coordinator or something similar. One of the best courses that I took here was conservation psychology, because it really got at the core of how do people think and how do you frame environmental messages so that it aligns with the way people think. So my second year here, I started applying, and this great job at Wesleyan, just the stars aligned and it opened up, and I started working there only about a month and a half after graduating, which was a little bit of a scary transition. I felt way more prepared than I think I would have been 2 years earlier. It's still a little intimidating. Wesleyan is a fairly small school, about 3,000 students, about 1,000 employees, but still, that's 4,000 people who are looking to you as you know all these things about sustainability. But I spent a lot of my first few months trying to get a handle on what is my community, and that was something that I had really thought a lot about while I was here, because community is such a big part of Antioch. And then moving to Wesleyan, not trying to just say, oh, well, this project worked at this school where I went to undergrad, or I heard about it here, so we're making it happen here, realizing that sustainability is something that you have to adapt into wherever you are, and that what works at place A may fail horribly at place B, and trying to get to know people and the whole culture of the community was really important, so that once I actually started to work on implementing programs, it wasn't as an outsider, as someone telling people what to do, but it was working with people on accomplishing that. So I've been there a year and a half now, and I really feel like I've become a part of the community. I'm still working on getting to know everyone because it's such a large community. There are still a lot of people that are surprised to find out that Wesleyan has a sustainability coordinator, but I'm trying to work on giving presentations to the faculty and to administrative assistants, and each year to get to know leaders of student groups and student government, and trying to make those connections so that when people have a question, they know that they can turn to me, that I won't necessarily solve all their problems, that's not my role, but that I can try to help guide people through the process. I won't always do it perfectly. A lot of times there are always mistakes, but I can really help guide things in the right direction. So that's the basics.
So I'm gonna throw a question out there, and then I want to open it up to the group. So you've been there for a year and a half. What has been the biggest challenge that you've faced in that first year and a half?
There are a lot of things, but I think one of the biggest ones is because I'm the first person in this position, I'm an office of one. I am lucky enough to have I think I have 6 student interns this semester, and I'll get a 7th for next semester. But it's basically, they're there part-time and not in the summers and not on breaks, so it's basically anything that's happening, I either have to do or I have to somehow convince someone else that they should take time out of what they're doing to help me out. And so that means that I have lots of aspirations about what I would like to do, and programs that, looking at other schools that are much larger or have much more established programs, and just yearning for this cool tool that they have on their website or this program that they have that it just simply, I don't have the resources to do. And so kind of accepting that implementing and integrating sustainability into the Wesleyan fabric is a gradual process. And that when I think of a really cool project, I started just making a list of here's what to do when you're done with these 25 other things that you're trying to manage simultaneously, and then coming to them one by one. And sometimes I'll have students that will come to my office and say, I'm really interested in one of these things that are on your bucket list. Do you want any help? And obviously the answer is yes. But it's just been hard to realize that I'm only one person. I only have so many hours in the day. I could easily make my job a 24/7 job plus, but I want to also get enough sleep and do the hobbies that I enjoy and spend time with family and friends. And so learning.
Maintain your personal sustainability.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that's common in my field is burnout, that because there are so many things you can do, and it can be really difficult to say no when you know that this is something really important and something that you want to be doing, to say, no, I'm really sorry, I can't do that, or I can just give you these few tools and then you're kind of going to have to work on it yourself. It can be really challenging. It's gotten easier over the past year and a half, but that doesn't make it easy. Yeah.
Jen, have you been focusing on any particular areas like composting or energy use, or like how, just coming in new and being one person, how have you identified your focus areas?
The nice thing about starting as the first person at a school, I don't really have shoes to fill. I had a job description when I started, but it was sort of a broad outline of what they were thinking I might want to do, but I've been able to chart my own path a little bit. I would say most commonly on a day-to-day basis, I'm focusing on something related to energy or something related to waste, but that can take a lot of different forms, and I try to at least have feelers out in all areas, trying to work with our Chief Diversity Officer on trying to connect the missions of our departments, because that's not something that's common at Wesleyan right now, and I'm trying to help to draw those connections. I do a lot of working with student groups that's frequently focus on food, whether gardening or sustainable food and that sort of thing. And the nice thing about my job is, like I was saying earlier, because there are so many different things that I can do on a day-to-day basis, I can choose to say, hey, I'm really not interested in looking into our composting program today. It's on my to-do list, but my brain is not there, so I'll work on one of these other things. And so it ends up that I'm never bored or frustrated. Well, I'm sometimes frustrated, but never bored, because there's always something else that I can choose to work on, and I don't have to pigeonhole myself. Does that kind of answer your question? I feel like I kind of went into a tangent.
No, that's helpful. So energy and waste are big areas.
Yeah, and it's been a challenge at times trying to align what I think is important with what the Wesleyan community thinks is important. So for example, right now there's been a big movement toward divestment. I mean, that's worldwide.
From fossil fuels.
Correct. And there's a Wesleyan student group that's very invested in divestment. I didn't mean that as a pun. But in my role as an administrative staff person, my role is not one of activism. It's kind of acting as an advisor and helping to help student groups do what they do better, but at times that can be a little bit dicey. Can I be helping the student group to facilitate what they're doing when what they're advocating isn't something that the administration is currently in support of, and trying to balance the relationship of advocating in the right forum for what I believe in, but not letting that overpower, kind of having two different roles as me. Libby will appreciate putting on different hats, in that I have the Jen hat and then I have the sustainability coordinator hat, and sometimes that hat is the working with students hat, and sometimes it's the I am an administrator hat, which is still a strange role to play, because I think typically administrator has a negative connotation, and it does to a lot of Wesleyan students. I'm trying to help students see that, no, most of these people are really nice. They want you to see what, your projects succeed, but there are certain ways that you have to follow the protocol, even if it can be frustrating to deal with the bureaucracy. So.
Just to know that Jess is on her way.
Okay. Yeah, so we expect to be joined by Jess Gerrior, who is the sustainability coordinator at Franklin Pierce University, just 19 miles or so down the road, and another recent alum of Antioch.
For your specific projects, are you tracking your progress? So at the end of 5 years, you can see all the things you did and how much energy you saved, how much waste.
Whenever possible, yes. So at my first year-end review, I worked on making a list of all of the projects that I had worked on over the past year, who I had collaborated with, whether an individual or a department or a student group or a community group, what the specific project was, and then what the outcomes were. Was there money saved? Was there waste diverted? Were there connections that were established? And then made a section of next steps. And I tend to be a very thorough person, so it was, I think, much more thorough than my boss was expecting, which makes it that there's a high standard for next year now. But it was also really helpful because on a day-to-day basis, I don't necessarily have a lot of time to reflect on what I've done and think about what are the implications of the programs that either I've successfully completed or that I've started to work on. And to take an opportunity to do a self-evaluation, it's something that I started here, but it's often easy to forget when there are all these things that have to get done and only so many hours in a day or in a week. But it was a very, very helpful process, and I'm trying to help myself out by doing more self-evaluation as I go throughout the year. It's not always successful because, like I said, there are only so many hours. But then also presenting that list to the community, having it available on the website, and talking. We have a very active sustainability committee on campus, and talking about what I've done with them. I'm also talking about trying to start a newsletter because since I'm the only person, the idea of doing a newsletter is a little bit daunting just because I have to come up with the materials and all these different things. But I'm finding that I think it will be really helpful. Maybe only once a semester or twice a semester will be very useful so that people are seeing here are the tangible results of what a sustainability coordinator is doing and what student groups are doing and what the sustainability committee is doing and all of the different parties on campus that are trying to move Wesleyan toward sustainability. Yeah.
What experiences did you have at Antioch that kind of prepared you and helped you transition into your role as a sustainability coordinator?
Probably the most helpful was the 2 required internships through the EE program. I did my first internship at St. Michael's College up in Burlington. Their sustainability office was only a couple of years old. The sustainability coordinator there, like me, is just an office of one. And so I was there and I worked with her on doing their first climate action plan, their first greenhouse gas inventory, and then starting to lay out a framework for a climate action plan. And so that sort of gave me a taste of what sustainability office might look like at a small school with a new program. And then in spring 2012, I was at Tufts University, which has a much more established program. It's almost 10 years old at this point. There were 2 people working in the office when I arrived. Now there are 3. And their sustainability director, who is she's more established, but she's basically my counterpart there. Her job looks very different from mine because she's at a higher level where she doesn't necessarily focus at all on energy. They have an energy manager who works within facilities who does all of the energy stuff. So she's kind of aware of what's going on, but doesn't deal with it. And so seeing how my position might look there. And while I was there, I worked on developing an employee sustainability education program that would be about a half-day workshop, and we implemented it. I led a couple of sessions of it, and then I get their newsletter regularly, and they're now doing the half-day workshop as a regular thing, at least I think once or twice a year, and it's nice to know that something that I worked on is continuing, at least in some form. But I think working in both of those offices helped me to really see that sustainability, I mean, it makes sense, but sustainability doesn't look the same at every school, and seeing how differently a sustainability office might operate depending on where you are and what office the sustainability office is part of, whether it reports to facilities or to a provost or directly to the president or to the finance department, and every school does it a little bit differently, but seeing all of the differences helped me to come to Wesleyan and not just think, well, we're going to just clone all of these projects here.
Well, Jen, an easy question, and I may have missed it in the introduction because I wasn't here, and then a tougher question. The first one is, to whom do you report?
I report to the Vice President of Finance and Administration, which is, I think, a really good place to report. It gives me some leverage in terms of making sustainability projects happen on campus. It doesn't have to be filtered through lots of layers. If this sounds like a good project, we can find a way to fund it and we can make it happen. Whereas I have counterparts at other schools who are a couple of layers down in facilities and they can't get a fairly basic program implemented. So when I saw that that was who this position reported to when I was applying, I was really excited because I knew it would show, first off, that sustainability is important to Wesleyan, that it's not just something tucked away into a corner, but then it would also give me the opportunity to make more things happen on campus.
The second tougher question comes from a question a student asked me yesterday in a leadership lecture I gave, and that is, do you foresee, or have you already encountered an occasion where Jen disagrees fundamentally with something Jen's been asked to do?
Yes.
That didn't take long.
It doesn't happen that frequently, thankfully. But one of the big projects that was already in the works before I arrived last July was Wesleyan. To back up a little bit, Wesleyan had a couple of big power outages in 2010, 2011 when we had the October snowstorm and all of this, and so we had lost power for an entire week. And not being there, I mean, it sounds bad, but it's hard to imagine it without being there. And so everyone sort of freaked out and said, we need to figure out a way to get emergency power to the campus. So they started looking into all these different options and decided that the best route was, right now we have a natural gas cogeneration plant on campus, which they had a gas plant that was converted to cogeneration, which is much more efficient, a couple of years ago. But then this is building an entirely new plant powered by gas, and coming in as the project was not entirely underway, but pretty far along in the process, I had to kind of catch up and then reconcile that personally, I'm opposed to fracking, and I really don't like that we're investing in natural gas in a new capacity. We're not moving to something different. And so I tried to catch up and do a lot of research and see, is there something else that we could do so that really for heat, for electricity, we might be able to figure something out, but it's really not any good quick way. They'd looked into geothermal and it didn't work financially, and then they'd looked into doing solar and wind and all these different things, and it was just too expensive for what they could handle. And so I spent a lot of time talking with student groups, because students were very opposed to the building of this new plant, and I had to, try to talk to student groups and try to be as diplomatic as possible, because I didn't want to be seen as oppositional to what the administration was trying to do. I understood a lot of the reasons why we were trying to pursue this, but I still at this point am not excited about the fact that it'll be launching next month. It'll be opening next month, and I I don't like that we're investing more in natural gas when I think we should be moving away from gas and toward more renewable fuels. But I had to try to find that balance, explaining why we were doing this and trying to explain a little bit about my own thoughts and position, but it was very difficult to balance those two components. And I expect that there will be opportunities, or there will be challenges like that into the future. But I've tried to do the best that I can to explain my personal thoughts, but not try to align, not change what I think, but just be diplomatic. And
Have you thought about where the no compromise point is?
Not.
Is there a point where you would say, I'm out?
Nothing has come up at this point that I've contemplated that. I'm not even sure what. I think I'd have to be there and see an opportunity and see, I just feel completely opposed to this. This makes no sense. This is just entirely unsustainable. I can't be a part of this. But I don't really see that happening. I think the longer that I'm at Wesleyan, if something new comes along, I can be involved in the beginning of the process and hopefully advise, at least to some capacity, so that we can move in a more sustainable direction. And we're already trying to do that at this point, that we're looking into geothermal and we're looking into renewables. It makes it a little bit more difficult because we'll now have a new gas cogeneration plant, so are we offsetting what we're generating on campus? Does that really make sense? How will that all work? But make do with what you have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Who's on your sustainability team, Jen?
In terms of employees,
Or is it staff, faculty, students? Is it representative? Or is it,
do you mean the committee or who works in my office?
oh yeah, you mentioned the sustainability committee.
So the sustainability committee is really it's faculty, staff, students, and administrators all working together. It tends to be more heavily staff focused. I've been trying to work over the past year and a half at getting more student representation and finding out from students what would make you want to come to a sustainability committee meeting. I mean, I can think of myself as a student, and I was involved in the sustainability committee while I was at Hamilton, where I went for undergrad, and I enjoyed it, but not everyone has the same passion for college sustainability that I do. So trying to figure out ways to make it appealing for students, how to recruit more faculty members and more students, and help them see that it's something relevant to them and that they can really have a great part in making decisions on campus, that it's really the best way to get involved.
So we've been joined by some people. Jess Gerrior, who I mentioned earlier, is the sustainability coordinator at Franklin Pierce University and another recent alum. And I think, Steve, do you know all the students in this room? Steve Jones is our campus president.
Don't ask
For
me
those
to
who
think.
have not, for those who have not figured out who Steve is, Libby McCann is here from the ES department and is the director of the environmental ed concentration. I think all of you know Taryn Fisher, who is the program director for the Green MBA program, and David Sobel, who is in the education department and who does so many things related to sustainability. I don't want to even tread there. So, yes, I will. Are there other questions for Jen before we give Jess the floor for a little bit? We'll open it up to everybody, but
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I think the main one, you said that you reported to the vice president of
Finance and administration, yeah.
So, are they requiring a financial benefit from the majority of your sustainability initiatives, or do they understand like the potential social implications of the adjustments that you're working to make as well?
A little of both. So my position was created as a 3-year trial position. And the idea behind it was that I would find enough savings through energy projects, waste projects, whatever, that my position would become self-funding. We already have a full-time energy manager on campus, and that's really one of the biggest sources of financial savings. So they haven't seen maybe the returns that they were initially dreaming of. I've been able to save a few $1,000s here and there, but that is not my whole salary. My position is also, for the first 3 years, half funded by the Student Green Fund, which every student has. It's an opt-out fee of $15 a semester that goes toward projects that advance sustainability on campus. And so there is the financial component, but something that I've talked about a lot with my boss is basically asking point blank, I'm not saving you money maybe in the way that you were imagining, but does that mean, should I be concerned about that? Should I be trying to focus more on the financial aspect of sustainability, or do you also value the work that I've done with students to help their projects become more successful by showing them different ways that they can approach things, about getting more involved in building community connections? None of these things can be easily measured, even not financially, but it's hard to measure the value of something like that. But I think it's what's more important, and that was what I thought even going into the position. And my hope, which has turned out to be true, is that Wesleyan does see the value of sustainability's impacts in all of the different ways. They would certainly love it if I can find ways to save them millions of dollars, and still working on that. But there isn't the pressure that I was a little bit afraid that would be on me, that I need to constantly be looking and checking my budget and trying to find the ways to save lots and lots of money. Yes.
It's a good question.
Have you implemented behavior change programs that have had cost savings benefits?
Right now, I'm currently working with a couple of students who are interns in my office on creating what we're calling eco-facilitators. It's modeled off of the eco-reps programs that are at a lot of different colleges, with the idea that we'll be training about a dozen students who will be paired with different dorms on campus, and will in turn be working with all of the freshman class that lives within those dorms, so that right when students enter Wesleyan, right now they get a little sprinkling of sustainability knowledge during orientation, but then it has kind of faded out, and then they don't really hear a whole lot about sustainability again, unless they're interested, obviously, until they become a senior, and then we have a big energy competition between student houses, but there's a lot missing in between. And so my hope is that creating the eco-facilitators program, it's going to have a very strong behavior change focus, focusing a small amount on topical areas. How do you conserve energy? How do you conserve water? But more importantly, on how do you teach people how to do these things, and how do you help generate behavior change in a way that's effective? So the model that we're hoping to do for the fall semester is that each student will have to implement a behavior change project to change one behavior of the students that live within the dorm to which they're assigned. So trying to keep it very small and focused, and then in the second semester they'll be working on a larger behavior change project for Wesleyan as a university. So we're still developing it. We've been working since last summer, and we'll be continuing through the spring, and we're working to make it an actual course that people can take for credit, that I'll be co-teaching with the chair of the environmental studies department, and we're really hoping that it will have a good impact. But I'm also expecting that there will probably be a lot of changes after the first semester as we realize what works well, what doesn't, and that it'll continue to be a work in progress.
Okay, I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Do you have electrical monitoring at small enough levels, like sub-panel levels, to be able to see behavior change by groups of students?
We do for dorms. in terms of energy use,
Yeah.
not in terms of water or really anything else. But one of the challenges is a lot of colleges have started to see these energy monitors where you can look and see in real time how your building is performing, but most students look at it and just say, what is this TV? Why can't I change the channel? And not, there's definitely a disconnect between understanding what it is and what information it's telling you. And I'm not really a huge fan of energy monitors because I think they most appeal to people like me who are really interested in how much energy my building is using, but they don't reach the people that you want to be interested in it. So I think since we have them, we will use them as tools in what we're working on, but I'm not advocating for us to expand them into other places because I haven't seen them be very effective at Wesleyan or really at most other places where I've seen them. There may be a good application if there's a good program built around them, but right now it seems like a waste of energy to show you how much energy you're using.
I love that. Because here we have studiously avoided getting into that realm, and we've used a relational outreach program that's based on one-to-one outreach to people who have the ability to affect our energy usage, and we have realized about a 10% on average reduction in electricity over peak usage from FY06 in the time that we've been doing that. And it's virtually no cost. I mean, it's very low cost, and it builds community and it builds connections among people on campus. And Josh recently came to see you, and he's all excited about working with you in the management department. Josh Lipkowitz is the sustainability and social justice coordinator here on campus, and he's the person responsible for doing this one-to-one outreach program for workspace energy efficiency. And so I'm so happy to hear you say that, Jen. Now I don't feel badly that we didn't invest in that.
I mean, because I think that's much more effective with the energy competition I was talking about for student houses. We've kind of overhauled it this year, and my student interns have been working on, posting leaderboards and giving tips for how you can reduce energy the most and trying to have houses strive to be the ones to use the least energy. And the costs are paying the student interns and the paper we use, and they're very, very minimal, and I think way more effective than this passive screen that exists in your dorm.
So we have about 15 to 20 minutes left in our time, and Jess, I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about your experience. I introduced you a little bit before you were here, and just explained that you're a recent alum of Antioch and that you're now the sustainability coordinator at Franklin Pierce University.
Right.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about what making that transition from Antioch to Franklin Pierce has been like?
Yeah. So it's always a transition from one community to another because, geography makes a difference, culture makes a difference, economy makes a difference, and while we're very much neighbors geographically, there's just a different mission, a different goal, a different sort of collective energy between the two campuses, and so the differences and the similarities have both been really interesting to me. One thing that's impressed me about the Franklin Pierce faculty is how imaginative they can be and how willing they are to collaborate, which is something that I wasn't quite sure how that was going to be, because that is so strong here at Antioch, and we have such great collaborators and people willing to rethink their systems and rethink their walls and knock them down and build them back up again as needed, and that's something that's always really impressed me here, and so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. So working with the faculty at Franklin Pierce is really interesting. We've come up with a couple of really good ways to collaborate. Of course, working with the students is a whole different ballgame too. Franklin Pierce is a very interesting place to both teach and learn because there's a huge variety in the skills and aptitudes and interests and just all those different kinds of indicators that makes up the whole profile of what is a Franklin Pierce student. So and that has really pushed me into new areas of, okay, well, that would have worked with this student or with this class, but it's really not working for this student or this set of students. So it's been challenging to just approach different kinds of audiences in that way. So yeah.
Biggest challenge in your time at Franklin Pierce?
Biggest challenge, I think, is trying to, I guess one way to put it is be everywhere at once, but that's not quite what I want to say. It's kind of being able to know everyone's job well enough to understand where are those points of commonality and those points of collaboration. Some of them are more obvious than others, of course. With the environmental science and environmental studies there are some sort of ready-made opportunities. The students are engaged in community-based research, or they're invested in a problem-solving solution or developing a research question. So you have some really good jump-in opportunities there. The recycling lab was one of the first things that I did with the ES 102 students, and literally the first time they met me, I was diving into a dumpster and pulling things out of it, and they were like, whoa. So that was really fun for me as an introduction. Some of them are a little more challenging. I think I'll point out athletics. That was a huge difference, of course, between Antioch and Franklin Pierce, is that the athletic culture is huge. Something like 40% of the students are engaged in at least one sport, and many of them several sports. And this is really important to them, and the athletes often are some of the stronger students because they're able to, they have that discipline as far as managing their time, and they're really motivated students too. But traditionally, and I'm betting this is true at Wesleyan too, the athletics...
I don't even know what you're going to say, and I think I agree.
Yeah. So the athletics is like this thing that you don't really even talk about very much in sustainability, and I get the feeling talking with many of my colleagues, like at conferences, that you shouldn't talk about that because athletics brings in money to the university, and you want them to recycle, and you want them to conserve water, and you want them to shut the lights off, and you can't tell them what to do because they're athletics, right? They're immune, right? And it's really unfair because I do know a lot of really outstanding athletics professionals now who are rigorous about, you clean up the field when you're done with it, and you shut off those lights, and you bring your water bottle. We don't use paper cups. So there's a lot of generalizations. That said, it has been tough to kind of crack that code and say, how can sustainability and athletics work together a little bit? And at Franklin Pierce, there is literally a concrete wall between my office and the athletics offices that you have to leave the building and go around and re-enter the building to talk to the athletics folks.
So you're going to take a sledgehammer to that wall?
I think about it sometimes. Yep. But one creative way that we've been able to engage with each other is, and actually this was initiated by one of the coaches, is, and this is not very fully developed right now, it's just an idea that we're just putting down on paper right now, but just looking at the landscape and what's there naturally, there's this beautiful hillside above one of the football fields that when you go up there, you've got this great view of the football field, and then you also see Mount Monadnock in the distance, and you see Pearly Pond, and you see the colorful fall foliage during football season, and we're thinking about, well, how could we let people see this, what we see, and bring them in and make them want to stay and make them want to really feel engaged, and not just, to buy more tickets, although that's important, but really be invested in this place and have it be, something that they want to bring their kids back to. And at the same time, not fall into that, I don't know if I want to call it a trap, but that sort of model of, let's build a big stadium with huge lights and make it very technology centered. How do we provide a little something different, something that's really uniquely Franklin Pierce? So that's just one example. There are many, many more, but.
And we definitely experienced something very similar, that Wesleyan banned the sale of bottled water right before I arrived in May 2012. And so that meant it was no longer for sale in vending machines. We could no longer have it. The dining service didn't sell it in their cafes. They didn't do it at catered events. but athletics could still sell it at any of their sporting events. And this has persisted until I tried to work with them last year for homecoming to coordinate buying reusable bottles that they could sell for a reasonable price, so that it wasn't, well, I'm not going to pay $20 for this bottle. That, you know, trying to make it so that you're not paying anymore, but then you have this Wesleyan branded bottle that looks attractive that you can reuse and bring to games with you. And they started selling them, and then after a couple people started coming up and saying, oh, do you have any bottled water? And they said, no. And they gave it maybe 45 minutes, and I wasn't there, and then they went out and bought flats of bottled water because people were wanting it, so let's go buy it for them. And it was a very frustrating moment of, well, but you didn't even really try it. People complained, and so you just gave in immediately. People always resist change, and if you don't give change an opportunity to succeed, it will not succeed. Similarly, like what Jess is talking about with the stadium, we had our first night football game this year, and with most things that happen at Wesleyan, sustainability is at least brought into the discussion of, well, should we be considering this? But with the night football game, an alumnus was donating the funding to bring in temporary lights, and sustainability was not even discussed. It was just, yeah, let's bring in these lights, and now everybody kind of wants to do it again, and these are super high-powered lights, and well, maybe we can be moving away from things that aren't part of the culture even, and it can be very frustrating. But we have gotten athletics to stop selling bottled water at games a little bit through coercion. We tried the more diplomatic route, and then it ended up being just, you're not allowed to have a loophole anymore, you just can't sell it, period. That's had some resistance, but I've been trying to work with them and help them to see that, well, I guess I am trying to impose this on you. That's not my intention. It's not, I don't want to make this difficult. I just want what you're doing to be more sustainable, and how can we make this work for you so that it can still be an enjoyable experience for the fans and for the players and for everybody coming in, but also be sustainable. And I think that's probably an issue at most colleges with athletics programs.
Yeah, and I don't think it's even to point out athletics, but just that, you know, to acknowledge there are different components of a college campus, and they all have priorities, and each of those priorities is important to them. And I don't think anyone thinks, you know, sustainability is a bad idea or sustainability stinks or anything like that. But it's like, well, we have these goals in mind, and what you're trying to do is counter to those. And so, like I said, it's trying to find those commonalities and also avoid, I guess, the contradictions, because we're talking about a culture change here, and the students are very clever. They know that if you're teaching one thing in your classroom and then practicing something different in the dining hall, or you're saying one thing on the athletics field, but the administration is pushing this other thing that counteracts that, you know, it's just like, you know, the teenager who's being told by his parents, like, you're going to do this, and then the parents go and do the opposite thing. You know, they're you know,
They're smart.
They're watching, and they're learning from everything that they see. You know, the campus itself, not just the prescribed curriculum. So.
Other questions or comments?
Yes, maybe just briefly, I guess at Franklin Pierce would have been what were the first and easiest things that you, or maybe not easy, but the first things that you kind of tackled. Was there a coordinator prior to you being there? Did you pilot the program? Or?
I am the second coordinator at Franklin Pierce. The person who had the position before me was part-time in addition to doing teaching. So I'm the first person who's had it as sort of a full-time permanent position, and I work 10 out of the 12 months in the year. I knew during probably the first week or two that the biggest issue to tackle was going to be communication. I just experienced a lot of, you know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and, you know, student affairs or student activities has all these kinds of things going on, and they're not connected in any way to residential life or to environmental services, our housekeeping department. So I knew that communication was going to be job one. So I made that my priority for the first year, and it's not that, you know, now I'm in my second year, I'm saying, okay, I've got the communication piece all done, now we can move on. It's definitely going to be an ongoing challenge, but I'm really glad that I put a lot of focus in communication that first year, because that's helped build relationships. People know that, you know, they can come to me with questions. I will help them to build solutions. I'm not just going to go into their office and say, you're not recycling enough. I couldn't believe how many times that happened during my first year there, that people saw me show up and they would confess all of their environmental sins to me, like I was there to enforce sustainability on them. And yeah, that happened a lot that first year. So during the second year, my big priority is finding ways to tie sustainability into student recruitment and retention, and also to do a lot more fundraising, and especially collaborating with other departments to do that fundraising. So.
Just what program were you in here at Antioch?
I was in the environmental education concentration in ES. Yep.
And I think your predecessor at Franklin Pierce was an alum also.
She was.
Yeah.
Yep. And I work pretty closely with the environmental science faculty, of course, and there's at least one alum that I work pretty closely there, Catherine Koenig.
Yes.
So.
And you said you're teaching a class?
Yeah, I actually teach two classes. The sustainability seminar, which is one of two prerequisites that students can take for the sustainability certificate program, the other one being building sustainable communities. And the second course that I teach is sustainability project. So I'm looking at the clock because this program is fantastic and it can take a few minutes to explain. So ES 302, or Sustainability Project, is kind of a culminating experience for students taking the certificate. And it's open to students of any major. So they will have taken any number of courses before they get to that course. It may be in environmental science, biology, political science, sociology, mass communications, management. This course allows them to take those little green pieces or green threads that are interspersed throughout all those courses. Their instructors have identified projects or themes or skills that have some kind of green content in there, and then they weave them together into some project that takes place on campus or within their communities. So when I say I teach that course, it's more like I don't know, some combination of project management and coaching, because the students really have to identify what are their learning goals, what do I want to see as a result of this project, how am I going to measure it and manage it and report it back. And so they have to focus a lot on questions that they haven't had to ask before. So we often have meetings that kind of look like this, and they're class project meetings rather than lecture. And I appreciate that so much, because I think after coming to Antioch, I could never go back to just standing in front of a lecture class and just delivering information. I mean, I can do that because I'm really excited about my topic, and I could do that all day long, but that's not what's exciting to me, and it's not what they need. So they need, as many opportunities as possible for hands-on leadership, and that's what they do. So, yeah.
All right, well, unless there's a last burning question, we'll just ask you all to thank our two guests. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you all.